Untuk informasi lebih lengkap dan berita terkait, klik link deskripsi. Dan jangan lupa juga untuk download aplikasi CNBC Indonesia yang tersedia di Play Store dan juga App Store. Jangan lupa subscribe ya. Pandemi COVID-19 membawa masalah kesehatan dan memporak-porandakan perekonomian negara-negara di dunia, tak terkecuali Jerman. Lantas bagaimana kondisi hubungan diplomatik antara Indonesia dan Jerman di tengah krisis kesehatan dan ekonomi? Terkhusus juga bagaimana hubungan dagang antara Jerman dan Indonesia dan juga investasi Jerman di Indonesia. Kami akan membahasnya bersama dengan Duta Besar Jerman untuk Indonesia, Ina Lepel, dalam Prime Words.
Selamat siang, hello, welcome. Fine, thanks. How are you? Welcome to my house.
Saat ini saya sudah bersama Her Excellency Ambassador of Germany for Indonesia.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you for welcoming us from CNBC Indonesia in your house.
Great pleasure to have you.
Okay. For the first question, talking about pandemic COVID-19, in the data, COVID-19 cases in Germany soared surprisingly 200,000 cases in 24 hours on last January in 2022. So how does Germany prepare its health and workers and hospital facility in the midst of this condition?
Yeah, unfortunately, this Omicron wave has caught us out in Germany quite a bit. Although numbers are still relatively low compared to other countries in Europe, it's simply galloping away. So what Germany is trying to do, we have a bit shifted the focus similarly to Indonesia from containment of the virus to trying to limit hospitalization and death. We think our hospitals are well prepared. We have also changed quarantine requirements for people who have tested positive or who have been identified as close contacts. So they don't have to stay in isolation for 10 days, but only for 7. But still, of course, we expect also people from hospitals to be out of action because of infection or contact. So that will be a risk we will be dealing with. But so far, the infection seems to be milder than the Delta wave. And therefore, so far, the hospitals are coping fairly well. But it is right to be careful because we don't know really how this will work out during time. It's really too early to say.
If we see the data, countries in the world are suffering from high inflation, and then the data for Germany is will reach in inflation 3.1% in 2021. So this is, I think, the highest in this year and figure since in 1993 for Germany. So what's Germany's strategy for deal to the high inflation?
Well, 3.1% may not look as much if one compares it on the global scale.
Or United States, maybe, if we compare.
Yeah, if we compare with some other countries. But you may know that German people are very sensitive when it comes to inflation because we had this big hyperinflation about 100 years ago, which is really long ago. But people like myself remember the terrible stories our grandparents told us about that, where they lost all their savings and their money could not buy anything and they had to carry it quickly to the shop to get anything at all. And so I think the Germans have a special sensitivity there, and therefore they already feel that 3.1% is a lot and the government should do something about that. But there are, of course, factors that are not easily controlled by the government. One is catching up effects after the pandemic that have caused a lot of demand for raw material and energy. Then there have also been pandemic-caused disruptions in supply chains, which have just created very strange reactions, but all led to increase of prices. And then, of course, the European Central Bank, which is in charge of monetary policy also in Germany, has had this policy of quantitative easing, and especially some emergency measures during the pandemic in order to support the economy in the situation. And so all these factors come into play. We have the principle that central banks are independent, so the German government is not going to influence that in any way. But from the European Central Bank itself, one can hear that they want to gradually phase out of this pandemic-induced bond buying. And I would suppose that in the medium term, we will also see less of the negative interest rates. And all that should hopefully contribute to calming down the price situation. In the medium term, Germany is also going to tackle one of the main drivers of inflation, which is high prices for oil and gas. We have set ourselves an ambitious target of providing 80% of energy demand from renewable energies by 2030. And if that can be achieved, we would be hopefully much more independent from these very volatile prices of oil and gas. And in the short term, the government has just launched the process for legislation that will give relief to low-income households who face high heating bills and give them some support there, and also an initiative to raise the minimum wage.
So many programs from Germany government for their society. Do you think in 2022, in this year, this is the time for our economic and healthy recovery?
Well, if the pandemic can really calm down after the Omicron wave, then I think everything will be ready for recovery, because there is a lot of pent-up demand waiting to be put on the table. Many people have had involuntary savings and want to spend their money on good things. So I'm hopeful, but of course it depends on the pandemic. And this pandemic has given us unpleasant surprises in the past. So I wouldn't sign any expensive bets at this point.
Okay. We see Olaf Scholz officially becomes a new chancellor for Germany. What are the diplomatic mission carried out by the new chancellor in the challenging of the era? We know current health and then economic crisis now.
Yes, well, normally new chancellors would have a flurry of introductory visits all over the place very soon after taking office. Due to the pandemic, this has been much reduced for our new chancellor, Olaf Scholz. He has only visited European countries and the leaders of EU and NATO so far, but a visit to the USA is scheduled for later this week. So this has been a bit slowed down, but he has had video calls, telephone conversations. So of course he has been diplomatically very active. And that is very necessary, because we are facing all those challenges, geopolitical, and then, as you said, health and the economic. And the German government as a whole had to hit the ground running, because this year is the year of our G7 presidency. So the new government had to agree on a program and on a setup for this presidency. And in this presidency, all those global challenges will have an important role, like health. In this, we incidentally agree with Indonesia as the G20 chair that the global health architecture really needs to be strengthened. If there were to be a totally new pandemic where we start from zero, no vaccines, no nothing, I think at the moment many mistakes that were made in this pandemic would probably repeat themselves, like the uncoordinated border closures, like the problems with recognizing each other's vaccine certificates and so on, health standards, all these things. So I think we agree that there is a lot of work
Yes.
to be done, and that can only be done on a global scale, and those G groupings can have an important role in that. And of course, economically as well. Many countries have suffered enormously. There has been backsliding in terms of poverty, of malnutrition, also of gender equality. So all this has to be addressed. On the other hand, there are some funds available, so this is also a chance to take a step back, figure out what the real priorities are, and also try to make a recovery that is greener and more sustainable. So with the European approach, also with the new Green Deal, we are focusing not so much on covering gaps, but also on investing very much in a future that is more sustainable and that will be less sensitive to external shocks that we have suffered during the pandemic. Of course, we also have to look at resilient supply chains, and we will look in the framework of the G7 presidency at all the digitization issues, at connectivity. There's a lot to be done, both in hardware connectivity and in people-to-people connectivity. So there are lots of challenges, but also I think lots of good ideas how to address them.
Talking about investment, you say before this, what do you think about is the doing of business in Indonesia? Because we know Indonesia and Germany have a bilateral relationship, especially in economy.
Yeah, there are quite a few global indicators for ease of doing business. And most of those say that Indonesia has made good progress in the last decade or so. And I would say that the omnibus law or this online supply, what was it? Sorry.
This is one of support from government Indonesia.
Yeah, the online single submission portal.
Yes, single submission.
A very convenient instrument, is well received by the business community. Hopefully, the latest complications with regard to the Supreme Court decisions can be sorted out so that people get complete legal certainty. And then I think we will have a good basis for more ease of doing business.
We must take a break our discussion, but after this, in next segment, we are talking about investment from Germany to Indonesia. Jangan kemana-mana, tetaplah bersama kami di Prime Words.